We are on SIP-9 today as part of our SIP reading club. For those that are new, we started covering each of the SIPs back in April and feature the author or authors of the current SIP bi-weekly. Today we'll start the session with Pavi and Reed asking questions like we usually do to the authors, and then we'll open it up to the community if there are any questions. Just a reminder, each SIP is recorded and then it's posted to the Stacks YouTube channel. And if you have any questions, feel free to DM me. I'm happy to help. This week we have Pavi, Distributed Systems Engineer at Hiro, Reed, Software Engineer at Hiro, Aaron, Staff Scientist and Engineer at Hiro, and Frieger, who I saw referred to as the one and only Frieger in another channel just a few minutes ago, longtime Stacks contributor and community member and founder of Frieger Pool, among many other things. All right, let's get it going. Pavi and Reed, take it away.
Awesome,
cool.
thanks,
Thanks,
Shannon.
Excited to have you for the first time. We have a community member, which is very exciting. I think it's really cool to cover. Reed, do you have anything to say?
Yeah, I mean, maybe Frieger, you could just give us a brief intro in your own words and tell us a little bit about how you joined the Stacks ecosystem.
I started using names on the Bitcoin network, or when it was back one name. So one name was the name. Sorry, start again. So one name was the name of the project, of the Stacks project at the very beginning, and I heard about it and I registered the name. And when it was renamed to Blockstack, I need to move my one name around, and so I started following the project more closely, and eventually I contributed to the Android SDK, because at that time I was doing lots of Android development, mainly open source, and I could contribute to that, so it started, and whenever I saw that something needs to be done, I started to work on it. So it was the same for the Frieger pool. I wanted to have a service that is good for me, and there wasn't any, so I started one. And I invite everyone to do the same. So make a pool if you want.
Awesome. Well, that's super open source mentality. Thanks for the introduction. I think we can kind of get started on talking about the SIP more specifically. So the SIP covers a trait definition for non-fungible tokens, which are kind of like, obviously really trendy and growing in popularity right now. So I think what we can start with pretty simply is just like, what is an NFT? Like, what's the definition? Erin, if you can answer, that'd be great.
Sure, yeah. So I guess I'll use the definition from the SIP and then maybe give like a metaphor from the real world. So NFTs are non-fungible tokens, are digital assets registered on any blockchain, but in this SIP we're talking about ones on the Stacks blockchain, where each asset sort of in like a class of NFTs has like a unique identifier and a unique owner. And one of the sort of key things about NFTs compared to fungible tokens is that instances of NFTs are either impossible to compare or difficult to compare against other instances of the NFT. So the way to think about this in like the real world is like a fungible token in the real world could be gold, because you can divide it up. If I have a pound of gold, I could split it up into 4 parts and have 4/4 of a pound of gold, and those are all roughly the same thing to different people. Everyone knows what a pound of gold is. So that would be like a fungible token. A non-fungible token in the real world would be something like a diamond, where the value of a diamond is not just like 4 times the value of 4 times smaller diamond. Diamonds have all sorts of different properties that make them difficult to compare against one another. I think that's like my long rambling answer for like what an NFT is in theory. That makes sense.
I guess a follow-up question I have, Aaron, is about so like NFTs in the Clarity language are like a first-class citizen. There's a keyword for creating NFTs, and it's like a part of the language. I guess I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about, and this isn't super related to this SIP, but I think it's relevant context. Could you tell us a bit about how that decision was made to include NFTs as like a first-class part of the language?
Yeah, so I think when you think about these like first-class asset types in Clarity, the sort of like key thing that you get from the first-class asset types is basically the ability to attach post conditions to a transaction that will cause the transaction to fail if there's some sort of like surprising movement of one of these first-class assets. And so in the design of the Clarity language and the Stacks transaction wire format, there was some thinking about like what should be included as a first-class asset. And we basically just looked at like what kinds of token standards were out there that had a lot of interest or compelling use cases already. And it was already the case that there were both a ton of sort of fungible tokens that people were excited about, but also non-fungible tokens that people were excited about. So we just sort of knew that it was a use case we should support.
Yeah, as a follow-up to that question, so given that NFTs are first-class citizens in Clarity, what is the use, and like why did we feel like we needed an additional trait for to like create like an NFT standard?
I think this would be a good one for Friedger, maybe.
Yeah, NFT, the native NFTs, the first-class assets in Clarity, they are private to the contract. So it's not possible for a user from the outside to say, hey, I have this asset, I want to move it around, or something like that. Therefore, you need some public functions on the contract that does this for you. And yeah, usually the main function is the transfer function. So you want to move your asset from one account or from one address to another. And therefore we need a definition how these assets should be moved around. And for NFTs, yeah, you need a transfer function where you say, I want to move this particular identified NFT from this user to the other user. And then we have some additional methods for metadata or to identify the NFT.
Cool. Yeah, Reed, do you think it would be kind of useful to maybe like go through each of the functions that are in the trait definition right now?
Yeah, absolutely. There's not too many, so we should be able to get through that pretty quick.
Yeah, maybe to add to my answer, the trait also allows you to define, or maybe no, it's not. Well, you can have an NFT implementing this trait, this NFT trait, but underneath you have one or two or more native digital, native NFTs. So therefore, you can do much more than you can do just with one native NFT.
Would it be fair to also say that like the NFT trade allows you to kind of associate kind of metadata with the NFT in kind of a standardized way?
Yeah.
So maybe let's go through the actual spec of NFT trade. Drew, would you want to kind of like read through the functions and kind of describe each of them?
Yeah. So I wanted to have enumerable, or how you say. So I want to have NFTs that you could enumerate. And therefore, one particular property of the trade is that you can get the last identifier that was used. So the trade defines that the identifier has to be an unsigned integer, and there's the method that is last token ID, so it returns the last token ID. So you can iterate from 0 to that number and you will find all information about all existing NFTs. Then there's a token URI where you take this identifier. It's called get token URI, and you put the identifier, the unsigned integer, as a parameter, and you get a string in ASCII that might give you some metadata about the NFT. It's optional, so if the creator of the NFT decides to provide no metadata, then it returns none. Otherwise, it returns the URI wrapped as optional in some. Then there's the function to query the owner. So it's called get owner, and again you put the identifier in there and you get the optional response of the owner. Then the main function is the transfer function. The transfer function takes again the identifier and then the owner where you want to send it from and the receiver where you want to send it to. And it returns always true if it is successful, otherwise it will return an error. At least that's the intention. It's not really possible to define this in a trade, but the specification should say that. And that's it. So these 4 functions define the trade.
When defining the trait, did you guys get inspiration from trait definitions in like other projects, other crypto projects?
Yeah, so there's the Ethereum standard, but I try to be as close to the Clarity language as possible. So, for example, the ordering of the transfer function, they are the same as the native NFT transfer function. And also the naming convention is closer to the Clarity thing than to what is used in the Ethereum standard.
I was curious maybe to talk a little bit more about the URI function, or the get token URI. Figure, I was curious, like, how do you envision people using or implementing this function? It feels to me like an NFT is something that will kind of live for a long time on the internet, so long that this network is around, and you can associate the URI with it that maybe won't last as long as the NFT. Are there strategies that you would recommend for NFT creators to kind of like, have similar permanence kind of with the data they're associating with the NFT? Like, how would you recommend for people to like where should they put things such that the piece of data can stay around with the NFT?
Yeah, ideally it should be something that is content addressable. So you put a hash of the content in the UI and then like IPFS, and then you can always retrieve it, and you know that this is actually the metadata for this URI, for this NFT, sorry. Yeah, I think we're still early. I don't know. I don't have a specific strategy or something like that. I wanted to keep it open that everyone can find their own ways.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, kind of expanding on the URI question. Another thing that's like mentioned in the SIP is the specification of the actual metadata that would exist at that URI should be covered in a separate SIP. And I think in Ethereum, like that's all like defined already. So I guess even though it's like open-ended still, what kind of fields would this metadata have, like possibly? Do you think?
Maybe also someone from the community can answer that. So usually you want to have some a label and a preview image, something like that, that you can show in a marketplace or in your wallet. If it's if the NFT represents a diamond, then you want to have maybe a picture or something of the diamond. Or if it's music, maybe have the cover of the track or something like that. Yeah, I don't know. I can't. The Ethereum standard is quite good, I think, but there are also all different aspects that we might want to cover in there. And again, I didn't decide anything that early because I wanted to see what's going on and what people want to make with the NFTs.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for the answer. Reed, do you have any follow-up questions?
Yeah, not exactly follow-up, but I have a specific question about some text I was confused about. There's a section of the SIP called Use of Native Asset Functions. And the beginning reads, although it is not possible to mandate in a clarity trait, contract implementers must define at least one built-in native non-fungible asset class that are provided as clarity primitives. Figure, could you maybe explain this a little bit and what this means and why this is the case?
So I wanted to make sure that the owner of an NFT has something that is really integrated in the blockchain and in the logic of clarity. So you could say, I have an NFT, but I don't use a native asset, and then all the security mechanism that comes with the post conditions, they cannot be satisfied, or you cannot define any post conditions about this NFT if there is no native NFT in the contract. So therefore, I said at least one should be there. Does it make sense?
Yeah, totally. Thank you. Pavi, do you have any more questions? I feel like we're kind of nearing the end of the SIP.
Yeah, I mean, it was a short sip. But yeah, so we have a few more questions. I'm not sure if you'll be able to answer this, but Erin, feel free to chime in too if you have a answer for this. But in retrospect, are there any other additional functions that seem like they could have been useful in this NFT trait? And the answer is no. Like that's also completely valid.
Well, there's a discussion about a memo for a transfer function, whether it should be included or not, or whether it should be a separate function, like it's planned for stacks 2.1 of the stacks transfer function. So I think there's stacks transfer memo. So maybe we want to have a transfer memo for NFTs as well. NFTs can have hundreds different of properties. So maybe we want to have a function like allowing someone else to send NFTs around in my name. So kind of an agent. Someone who can deal with my assets. That's what comes to my mind.
Cool. So like kind of like a delegate NFT function.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Erin, did you have some more thoughts on this?
Oh yeah, the other sort of class of things that comes to mind with this SIP is like maybe some recommendations around print statements. So a lot of contracts use the print functionality to like emit events to explorers, so that explorers or other interested API systems and stuff like that can track state transfers in contracts. Yeah.
There was a question from Marvin why we didn't include more functions, and I just wanted to have the really basics in there. And the nice thing of trades is that it doesn't prevent you from adding other functions. When we come to consensus what we want in the future, more functions, then there could be contracts already that implement this already.
Yeah. Okay. So moving on. Yeah. It seems like there's definitely like more interesting functionality. So considering that we can also include functions that like aren't in the trait, do you possibly see a future where we would like release an updated standard where it would be kind of like a superset of the functions that are proposed right now in the trait?
Yeah. So we can mix different traits together.
Armin, did you have any questions?
Hi. No, I was just typing them in chat, but I suddenly got a pop-up to join here, so I figured I'd oblige. But no, I think Friedgar already answered some of those questions. So that's also something that we've seen different people ask if they compare it to ERC equivalent. It's like we pass in a sender and a recipient to the transfer function, right? But what you then see is that pretty much every NFT has a guard that checks if the sender parameter is equal to the transaction sender, which obviously you want to do. But then the question is like, well, then why do we have that sender parameter in the first place, since you don't have an approval mechanism, at least not now? Was that to account for something like that in the future, Friedgar?
Yes, indeed. Yeah. So you can think of all different authentication methods that are defined in the contract.
Right.
But yeah,
Maybe for the people that don't know, like what is an approval mechanism? Like how do the ERCs deal with that?
well, you could have a function, a public function that only the owner of the NFT can call and say, from this point in time, this user can move my assets. And then in the transfer function, you check whether the sender is either the owner, the actual owner, or someone who was approved by the owner. And then you allow the transfer of the asset. Or you can just hard code it and say, these 5 people can move the asset, even though if they don't own it, it's possible as well.
Right. Do you have a concrete example of when that is useful? Like as a user, when would I want to approve something like that?
Nope. Well, if you trust someone else to manage your assets, I don't know. I think in Ethereum you have good use cases for that, but I don't know.
I guess I'll give one then.
Yeah,
there
do.
are certain DEXs or DeFi protocols where something like an approval is mandatory, I should say, or important to make trades happen, so that you can post an order and have that fulfilled at some other point in time, and the contract is pre-approved to do that token transfer on your behalf. I guess that could be one use case.
Yeah, you can approve contracts as well. Probably that's, or you want to use that more than actual users, yeah.
Thank you, that was my question.
Yeah.
Yeah, Marvin, now that you're here, I think it'd be kind of cool if we talked about the issue that you posted in the Stacks blockchain repo about a semi-fungible token. So, I don't know, maybe if you like describe what that is, what you think the use cases could be, that could be interesting. Yeah, like love to hear your response. But also, is it possible for you to talk closer to your mic because you sound a little bit quiet?
Oh, do I? Let me see if I can turn up my mic a little bit too. Is it better now?
I can't tell.
Not really. Yeah, if you could just maybe.
Okay, I cranked the input volume. Is it horrible now?
No, now we're rocking. This is good.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for confirming. Okay, yeah, it's funny you noticed that draft. Yeah, a semi-fungible token, and I would love to have Friedger weigh in on that as well. Is I guess next time we'd be talking about SIP-10, which is also pioneered by Friedger. That is a fungible token like Stacks is, so you can interchange any for another, and there's no difference, right? Unlike an NFT. So what I was working on is a standard that is sort of in between both of these types of tokens. So Friedger worked on a SIP-9 NFT, SIP-10 fungible token, and then sort of a hybrid of both of them is a semi-fungible token, which you can equate as an NFT. So it has an identifier, but it also has a supply. So if you look at an NFT, so we're looking at SIP-9, NFTs are all identified by an incrementing number, like Friedger said, so we can enumerate them. So that means that if I create an NFT, say a Friedger token, then someone has the Friedger token with ID 1, another one has the one with ID 2 and 3, and so forth. With a semi-fungible token, you can say we have 5 people that own a Friedger token with ID 1 or ID 2 or whatever. So why are they semi-fungible? Well, because like you identify them with that token ID, but you can also very well just create an NFT with that, because you can just say like, well, ID number 5 has a supply of exactly 1 instead of a different number. And then you might think like, well, why is that useful? Well, if you look at some real world counterparts, say people that collect anything at all in the world, so you collect postage stamps or trading cards or anything like that, you will know that every single stamp that you have is not the only single one in existence. Well, it might be extremely rare, right? But if you have a particular stamp, other people might have it as well. So you have different kinds, but they all belong to the same collection. So that's what a semi-fungible token can bring, and the use cases for something like that would be a game that has its economy on chain, so you can represent in-game items as different NFTs that have different supplies and so on. And then you might say on your part, like, well, you can just deploy a new NFT contract for every single type, right? But that is not always as flexible if you want to mint new types at will. So yeah, curious you picked up on that. I hope that explanation was sufficient.
Yeah, that was a great explanation. Thanks for that. Yeah, Friedger, Aaron, do either of you have more thoughts on semi-fungible tokens and like what it could add?
I just had an idea, but I lost it. What I want to say. No, sorry. I forgot what I wanted to say.
Oh, yeah. Okay, no problem. Yeah, that's fine. If you ever remember, you can just like bring it up again. Cool. Yeah. Yeah. So I feel. Oh yeah, actually, Reed, do you have any questions? Because I think I have one or two more.
Yeah.
So I think I'm good.
It came back. Sorry.
Yeah. Go for it.
So you could also say you share the ownership of an NFT. So you can say I have 100 parts of my NFT, and that would be a semi-fungible token. And then you can distribute parts of it to users.
That's a cool idea. I didn't even think of that one.
So you could take a Boombox NFT that owns rewards, and then you can say 30% goes to this or 30% go to that user. So the ownership of this Boombox is distributed, and rewards are paid according to the percentage that they own.
I guess that would also allow people to subdivide an NFT later if, say, the NFT itself becomes too expensive and you want to have people come in on that. That's interesting.
Yeah. I was wondering whether it makes sense to have the NFTs require that semi-fungible token also have the implements the trade of the NFT. But then if you want to transfer, maybe you can only transfer the whole NFT if you own the whole. Otherwise it would fail. I don't know.
I guess those are topics worth exploring, yeah. I would love to do a separate call on semi-fungibles too if people are interested in it, not to hijack this reading club. Going back to SIP-009, I guess I have a question for like everyone here, also in the audience. What are some of the most popular NFTs that are out there right now on Stacks? We see that there's been a bit of an explosion lately with all these different projects. Did we talk about these a little bit? Is that worth mentioning in this call still?
Yeah, I think it's definitely worth mentioning.
How do people interact with us now? They write it in the stage chat or?
Yeah, feel free to raise your hand on the bottom and request to come up, and we'll bring you up on stage.
What I wanted to mention about NFTs as well is one thing thinking about doing batch transfers. So if you have several NFTs, maybe we can have a function that allows to send all of them at the same time. And then, especially with NFTs, it might be interesting to have something like the creator of the artwork or the underlying what the NFT represents. So if the NFT is sold, then the creator gets some royalties or something like that.
Yeah, I think those are good ideas. maybe see until people drop some NFTs in chat that exist currently. But to address your point with batch transfers, I think that's really something we should explore, because you know that every time you do a contract call, there is a fixed cost on that, right? And it reads the contract. So if you know, it's perfectly possible to deploy a contract like the Send Many tool does for Stacks tokens and create one for NFTs. But then the issue you have is that if you have a contract call in your fold operation, in your iterator, that it rereads the contract every single time. It's my understanding that maybe we're going to get a different type of contract call that keeps the contract in memory, but for now that would really chew through your budget. So it's really worth exploring a trade that would implement a bulk transfer of some kind, because SIP-9 and 10 don't currently have it. And curiously, since the semi-fungible is brought up, it is also something that I was including, because I recognize that same issue with existing standards, so both SIP-9 and 10.
Hey guys, can I ask a question? So what's the upgrade path for doing something like batch transfer? Like, would we be switching out the functions that implement the trait, or would that mean like complementary traits or a whole new like version of NFTs?
I would say it's a complementary trait, because traits are composable. It's not necessary to define everything again.
Okay, interesting.
Another question for Erin. Do you have anything in mind in terms of like possible changes to the clarity language, post conditions, etc., that could, I don't know, kind of help these different NFT / FT / semi-fungible FT applications that are kind of coming up?
There's nothing really that that is like slated for 2.1. It really expands the capabilities that you currently have with NFTs or FTs. Go ahead, Frieder.
Isn't there the possibility to dry run a contract call so that you can see what post conditions would be required to actually execute the function? Or is it not for 2.1?
Oh yeah, so I think that should be possible without any consensus changes. Like that should just require like either special capability in a stacks node or a more advanced programming tooling.
Yeah, because at the moment sometimes it's difficult to find out which native NFTs or which native assets are used in the contract. So you might need to analyze the code or hard code, whatever you want to move around. So if you can do these dry runs, then you can show the user what the transaction will, or the function will do.
And then he can
confirm it. And then he can confirm that, or she can confirm that she actually wants to do it.
Would that kind of just be like, could that be like added through even like the command line interface, where like you just dry run like some transaction call and the output would possibly be like all the modifications to like whatever underlying asset classes were touched? Would that be like a possible implementation, Erin, I guess?
Yeah, I think so.
Also in the web app or in an application, you would just call it without modifying the state of the blockchain and then see the outcome. Yeah.
Right, sure. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it could be like command line interface, RPC, like both things, I guess. Yeah, so another question Reed and I had laid out before is it seems like for some of these functions, like we can't specify the exact behavior that we want. So it seems like there's some amount of burden on clients in terms of like monitoring whether functions in the trait are failing or not, needing to use post conditions sometimes. Like, how scalable is this? Do we see this being like mitigated by use of like third-party applications? If anyone has thoughts.
No, I don't.
Yeah, that's fine. Cool. Yeah, I mean, if no one has thoughts, we can kind of just move on. Reed, do you have any more thoughts or questions?
Yeah, I have another point about read-only or defining read-only functions in a trait.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's something that is suggested for 2.1. Is that right, Aaron? So at the moment, the last token ID always returns a response object or response type. It would be enough to just return a integer.
Yes. Yeah. With if we could add define read only to traits, which there is an issue for adding that in Stacks 2.1, then yes, traits would be able to just return sort of a raw value rather than a response type.
I'm just kind of curious, this is tangential, but like, what was the reasoning behind not initially allowing read-only functions to be called? I mean, to be included in traits.
I think there's just like a simplicity / oversight, like yeah, I think there's just a lot of stuff happening in traits, and we wanted sort of the simplest design that would get us something usable. So while not having a read-only indicator in the trait maybe limits traits a little bit, you can still sort of get around that.
I guess, Aaron, I got a follow-up question for that. Is there, and maybe I just missed it, but is there a plan to introduce that in the future, maybe in Stacks 2.1, that you can define a function in a trait that does not have a response return type, but say something else?
Only if that function is a read-only function. But
Right.
yes, there's an issue in the Stacks blockchain repo about adding support for read-only in traits.
Awesome. Are there any more questions? Anyone in the audience?
Just want to say I see Joe dropping all these NFT projects in the stage chat, so you guys should check it out. Like I thought I knew them, but there's just too many to count these days.
Thanks, Joe. Go ahead, Greg.
Oh, I was saying, what if we made an NFT over traits and people could buy their favorite traits in the NFT trait? Maybe that would be a big seller. I mean, I don't really know. That was kind of a silly idea, but that was kind of semi-serious. So anyway,
I think it's a great idea, Greg. I would buy it.
thanks.
Any other questions? Well, we have Friedger and Aaron here.
I guess I could do another one also, not directly related to SIP-9, but Friedger, weren't you experimenting with minting NFTs for your stacking pool, or did I misunderstand that?
Freaker, you're muted if you are talking.
Yeah, okay, I was... yeah. So I have an NFT for the pool, but only it was distributed or was airdropped to the participant of cycle 3 and 4, but no one was claiming them, so they're still sitting there. But what's interesting is you could use Bitcoin transaction to mint NFTs. I did that with fungible tokens, but it's the same with NFTs. So you could say, if I transfer a certain amount on Bitcoin, then your smart contract of the NFT can verify that this transaction happened and mint an NFT. So you can interact with the Bitcoin transaction and do something on the Stacks chain. Send it to a predefined address or something like that.
I guess as a follow-up then, those NFTs that you airdrop for your stacking pool, and I guess also then the fungibles that you minted at a later cycle, did those have a specific purpose? Was that more like an experiment, or is that something that has a larger use case or something that you're working on? Would be curious to hear, like maybe this can also inspire people, like some of the unique use cases for NFTs.
Yeah, so the Freaker pool token were just an experiment to, it was part of the story about, a story about what the blockchain is, explained in a fairy tale thing. So I had an artist who made some drawings, and then I asked the artist to also do some a drawing in this same style for Freaker pool. The other one is really about auditing what the Freaker pool is doing. So whenever the Freaker pool receives Bitcoin rewards for stacking, everyone can see them and submit them to this auditing contract, and then you generate the same amount of fungible tokens on the Stacks chain as you have received on the Bitcoin network, and thereby you can then audit how you contribute or distribute your rewards on the Stacks chain. Because Freaker pool is paying out in stacks, so not in Bitcoin as some other pools do. And if we have equivalent amount of like wrapped Bitcoin rewards on the Stacks chain, then we can do the better auditing on the chain. Does it make sense?
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I guess how do you see this moving forward, like with SIP-9s and NFTs on Stacks? Like, do you have any vision for what's going to happen next? I know that's a broad question, but since you're so present in the ecosystem, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think the next thing is one or more marketplaces. There are already some marketplaces for particular NFTs, but the general marketplace will be there soon. Should be soon there. Also, the definition of the metadata is the next step. That's really important to settle on that.
Is there an issue or something that people can go to see that conversation taking place? Maybe that was also mentioned before, but
no, there is. Let's see when I put it in the stage chat.
Great. Any other questions from the audience? Pavi and Reed, anything else?
I think that's it for me.
I think that's it. Yes, that's it for me too.
Thanks, everyone.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks everyone.
Frigger
has another. Yep. Go ahead.
I have a website from the early days about NFTs. It's called 24T. It's a Swahili name for non-fungible. Maybe I will revive them and put all the NFT projects in there as a reference page. That's it. Thank you.
Sounds great. And Marvin, do you want to plug your other session coming up with Frigger?
Well, I guess I'm obliged to do so now. Yeah. So for those of you that haven't seen this in passing, we launched a program called Clarity Universe that's revolving around everything related to Clarity. So this is learning how to write Clarity smart contracts, but also just general blockchain topics. So exactly what was talked about today as well. Like what is an NFT and why do you want to use that thing? And in that whole program, we have a session coming up in just 6 minutes where Frigger is going to present his stacking pool. So I don't want to give away too much yet. I'll leave it up to Frigger, but bound to be a very interesting session. As you might know, Frigger has arguably one of the most popular pools. I don't know the latest stats, so Frigger could chime in on that. But yeah, that's coming up in just 6 minutes. So if you're interested in joining, because it's completely open, there is a section in the Stacks Discord called Clarity Universe. The channel is called Meet the Team with like dashes in between. And that's where you'll find a link to join. So this will be on Zoom. So yeah, feel free. Thank you, Shannon.
Sure. And thanks, Pavi, Reed, and Aaron as well, and Frigger. Our next SIP session will take place on Wednesday, October 6th at 2 p.m., where we're going to cover SIP-10. I'll release the recording of this session in our Stacks YouTube channel. Otherwise, any questions, any comments, let me know. Have a great rest of your week. Thanks for joining.